The morning rain had turned the sidewalks of downtown Portland into a slippery obstacle course, and Zara Chen was losing the battle against both gravity and time. Her leather portfolio slapped against her hip as she hurried down the crowded street, dodging umbrellas and puddles with equal desperation. The client meeting was in 10 minutes, and she still had 3 blocks to go. Her phone buzzed with another text from her roommate about the overdue rent, but she couldn't afford to slow down. This graphic design project could finally be her breakthrough, a complete rebrand for a local tech startup that actually had a decent budget. After months of designing wedding invitations for distant cousins and creating flyers for neighborhood garage sales, she desperately needed this win. The familiar green awning of Grind Coffee came into view, and Zara felt a surge of relief. Suggested this location because it was halfway between her apartment and the client's office. But now she realized she could grab a quick caffeine boost before the meeting. Her hands were already shaking from nerves. She didn't need withdrawal headaches on top of everything else. The coffee shop was busier than usual, filled with the typical morning crowd of laptop-wielding freelancers and business people grabbing their daily fuel. Zara squeezed through the line, checking her phone for the 100th time. 8 minutes. She could do this. 1 large coffee, black, and make it fast, please, she told the barista, already pulling out her crumpled bills. Zara. The voice came from behind her, deep and confident with just a hint of curiosity. She turned around, expecting to see someone from college or maybe a former client, but instead found herself face to face with a man she'd never seen before. He was tall, probably in his early 30s, with dark hair that looked like he'd been running his fingers through it, and intense brown eyes that seemed to be studying her with genuine interest. "I'm sorry, do we know each other?" Zara asked. Glancing nervously at the time on her phone, the man's face broke into a warm smile. "Vincent Cross. I have to say, I'm a huge fan of your work. I've been following your reviews for years." Zara blinked, confusion washing over her.
Hi.
Reviews. She designed logos and websites, not reviews. "I think you might have me confused with someone else? Are you kidding? The literary critic from the Portland Tribune? Your review of Midnight's Edge last month was absolutely brilliant. You completely understood what I was trying to accomplish with the unreliable narrator." The barista called out her order, but Zara barely heard it. This stranger, Vincent Cross, thought she was some kind of book critic. The name sounded vaguely familiar, but she couldn't place it. Her mind was racing, trying to figure out how to politely correct him without creating an awkward scene. "Listen, I really think you have the wrong person," she started, but Vincent was already pulling out his phone. "You actually have your review bookmarked." He wrote about how the protagonists' memories were deliberately fragmented to mirror the victim's experience. It was such an insightful analysis. He scrolled through his phone with enthusiasm. "And your piece on contemporary noir fiction? Pure genius." Zara felt her cheeks heating up. She should definitely correct him, but there was something oddly flattering about being mistaken for someone whose work this man clearly admired. Plus, she was curious about why he seemed so invested in this critic's opinions. "Your coffee?" the barista called again, this time with a note of impatience. "Oh, right." Zara grabbed her cup, using the moment to think. She glanced at her phone. 5 minutes until her meeting. She should leave now, clear up the confusion, and get to her appointment. Instead, she found herself saying, "Thank you. That's very kind of you to say." Vincent's eyes lit up. "Would you have a few minutes to chat? I know this might sound presumptuous, but I'm actually working on a new novel. I'd love to get your thoughts on the direction I'm taking. Your perspective on character development has really influenced my writing process." Zara's rationale. Mind was screaming at her to explain the mistake and leave, but something about his genuine enthusiasm made her hesitate. When was the last time someone had been this excited to talk to her about her work, even if it wasn't actually her work? "I have a meeting in a few minutes," she said slowly, "but maybe we could talk briefly." "Perfect." Vincent gestured toward a small table in the corner that had just been vacated. "I promise I won't keep you long." As they settled into the worn leather chairs, Zara tried to calculate how much trouble she could get into by continuing this charade. It was harmless enough, right? She'd chat for a few minutes, then politely excuse herself and probably never see him again. So, Vincent leaned forward, his coffee untouched in his eagerness to talk. I'm curious about your thoughts on the current state of psychological thrillers. You think authors are pushing the envelope too far with unreliable narrators, or is there still room for innovation? Zara took a sip of her coffee, buying time while her mind raced. She'd read plenty of thrillers over the years, but analyzing them professionally was entirely different from enjoying them casually. Still, she found herself intrigued by the question. I think, she said carefully, that readers are becoming more sophisticated. They can handle complex narratives if the payoff is worth it. Vincent nodded enthusiastically. Exactly what I was thinking. The audience is ready for more challenging material. Despite herself, Zara found she was enjoying the conversation. Vincent was clearly passionate about his craft, and his respect for this critic's opinions was oddly endearing. She glanced at her phone again 2 minutes until her meeting. I really should go, she said, standing up reluctantly. Of course, thank you so much for taking the time. Vincent stood as well, then hesitated. I hope this doesn't sound too forward, but would you be interested in reading an early draft of my new manuscript? I'd value your professional opinion. Zara felt a flutter of panic. This was getting too complicated. She should definitely come clean now, before things went any further. I'm pretty swamped with deadlines right now, she said, which was at least partially true. I completely understand. Maybe we could grab coffee again sometime. I'd love to continue this conversation. Before Zara could respond, her phone started ringing. The client's name flashed on the screen, and she felt a surge of panic. She was officially late. I have to take this, she said, already backing toward the door. It was nice meeting you, Vincent. Likewise, Zara. I hope we can do this again soon. As Zara hurried out of the coffee shop, his phone pressed to her ear, and apologies already streaming out. She couldn't shake the feeling that she'd just made everything much more complicated than it needed to be. But for those few minutes, she'd felt like someone whose opinions mattered, whose thoughts were valued and respected. The rain had stopped, and weak sunlight was beginning to filter through the clouds. Maybe this day would turn out better than she'd expected after all. 3 days later, Zara was still thinking about her encounter with Vincent Cross. She'd successfully landed the tech startup project, which should have been occupying all her mental energy. But instead she found herself wondering about his manuscript and whether the real Zara Chun, the critic, had actually influenced his writing. Out of curiosity, she'd looked him up online and discovered he was somewhat of a big deal in the literary world. His last 3 novels had all been bestsellers, and his psychological thrillers had a devoted following. The thought that someone of his caliber had been so eager to discuss literature with her, even if it was based on a misunderstanding, was strangely thrilling. She was working on logo concepts at her usual corner. Table and grind coffee when a familiar voice interrupted her concentration. Zara, what a pleasant surprise. She looked up to find Vincent approaching with 2 cups of coffee, that same warm smile on his face. He was wearing a navy sweater that brought out his eyes, and his hair was slightly less disheveled than before. Vincent, hi. She quickly closed her laptop, not wanting him to see the graphic design work that would immediately blow her cover. I hope you don't mind, but I got you a coffee. Black, right? He set the cup down and settled into the chair across from her. I was hoping I might run into you here. Thank you, that's very thoughtful. Zara wrapped her hands around the warm cup, trying to ignore the guilt gnawing at her stomach. She should have corrected the misunderstanding days ago. I've been thinking about our conversation, Vincent said, pulling out a tablet. You mentioned that readers are becoming more sophisticated, and it got me wondering about the balance between challenging material and accessibility. Zara nodded, trying to look thoughtful rather than terrified. It's definitely a delicate balance. Exactly. I've been working on this new character, a forensic psychologist who starts questioning her own memories after a traumatic case. But I'm worried the psychological elements might be too complex for mainstream readers. Vincent swiped through what looked like manuscript pages. What's your take on how far authors can push psychological realism before losing their audience? The question was fascinating, and despite her anxiety about the deception, Zara found herself genuinely engaged. She'd always been drawn to stories about unreliable narrators and psychological complexity. I think readers appreciate being trusted with complex material, she said, warming to the topic. If you ground the psychological elements in relatable emotions, fear, doubt, the desire for truth even, the most intricate concepts become accessible. Vincent's eyes lit up. That's brilliant. You're absolutely right about the emotional grounding. I've been so focused on the technical aspects that I might be losing sight of the human element. The technical stuff is important, Zara continued, surprised by her own confidence, but it should serve the story, not overshadow it. Readers want to feel something, not just be impressed by the author's research. You have such a gift for cutting through to the heart of things, Vincent said, making notes on his tablet. This is exactly the kind of feedback I was hoping for. Zara felt a warm flush of pride, quickly followed by a stab of guilt. She was enjoying this conversation far too much for someone living a lie. I'm curious about your process, Vincent continued. How do you approach reviewing a book that's technically proficient but emotionally hollow versus one that's flawed but genuinely moving? Before Zara could answer, she noticed a woman approaching their table. She was petite with short auburn hair and sharp, intelligent eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. She wore a professional blazer and carried a leather messenger bag that looked expensive. Vincent Cross, the woman said, extending her hand. I'm Holly Martinez. We had an appointment. To discuss your upcoming novel? Vincent looked confused for a moment, then his face cleared. Holly, of course. I'm so sorry, I completely lost track of time. He gestured to Zara. I'd like you to meet Zara Chen from the Portland Tribune. We were just having the most fascinating discussion about psychological realism in contemporary fiction. Holly's eyebrows shot up and she turned to study Zara with new interest. Zara Chen, the literary critic? Yes, Vincent said proudly, as if he'd discovered her himself. Her insights have been incredibly valuable. Zara felt the blood drain from her face as she watched Holly's expression shift from confusion to something approaching suspicion. How interesting, Holly said slowly. I'm actually quite familiar with Zara Chen's work. We've corresponded several times about potential collaboration opportunities. The coffee shop suddenly felt too warm, and Zara's heart began racing. This was exactly the kind of situation she'd been dreading. Have you? Vincent looked between the two women, still oblivious to the tension building at the table. Oh yes, Holly continued, her voice taking on a sharper edge. In fact, I was just thinking how different you look from your author photo, Zara. Have you changed your hair recently? Zara opened her mouth, but no words came out. She could feel the walls closing in around her elaborate deception. Author photo? Vincent asked, looking puzzled. Holly pulled out her phone and began scrolling. I have it bookmarked, actually. Zara Chen is quite a bit older than you appear to be, and she has long blonde hair, unless you've had some very dramatic work done. Silence that followed was deafening. Zara could hear her own heartbeat and the distant hum of the espresso machine. Vincent's face was cycling through confusion, realization, and something that might have been hurt. I can explain, Zara said weakly, but she wasn't sure she could. Holly held up her phone, showing a professional headshot of a woman who looked nothing like Zara. This is the real Zara Chen. She's 53 years old and has been reviewing books for the Tribune for over 15 years. Vincent stared at the phone, then at Zara, then back at the phone. I don't understand. Neither do I, Holly said, settling into the third chair at their table, with the air of someone who intended to get to the bottom of things. But I'm very curious to hear the explanation. Zara felt like she was drowning. The conversation she'd been enjoying so much just moments before now felt like evidence of her deception. She'd been so caught up in the intellectual stimulation and Vincent's obvious respect for her opinions that she'd convinced herself the lie was harmless. My name is Zara, she said quietly, but I'm not Zara Chen the critic. I'm a graphic designer. And when Vincent approached me the other day, I thought he was mistaken about who I was. But then he seemed so excited to talk about books, and I didn't want to disappoint him. Vincent leaned back in his chair, processing this information. So you've been pretending to be someone else this entire time? Not pretending exactly, Zara said, though even she could hear how weak that sounded. I mean, I do read books, and I do have opinions about them. I just don't write professional reviews. But you let me believe you were a respected literary critic, Vincent said, his voice carefully controlled. You let me ask for your professional opinion on my work. Your opinions were still valid, Zara said desperately. Just because I don't write reviews doesn't mean my thoughts about books aren't worth considering. Holly was watching this exchange with obvious fascination. This is quite a situation. Though I have to say, from what I overheard, your insights about psychological realism were actually quite astute. Vincent shot her a look that suggested he didn't appreciate her input at the moment. Look, Zara said, standing up abruptly. Should go. I'm clearly in way over my head here, and I've already caused enough confusion. Wait, Vincent said, also standing. Don't just leave. I'm trying to understand why you would do this. Zara looked at him, seeing the genuine hurt in his eyes, and felt worse than she had in years. Because for a few minutes, I felt like someone whose opinions mattered. I felt intelligent and interesting and valued. I didn't want that feeling. To end, the honesty in her voice seemed to catch Vincent off guard. His expression softened slightly. But surely you must know that your opinions matter, regardless of your profession, he said. You don't need to be a published critic to have valuable insights about literature? Easy for you to say, Zara replied, gathering her things. You're a successful novelist. People actually care what you think. As she hurried toward the door, she could hear Holly saying something to Vincent about understanding and perspective, but she didn't stop to listen. She'd already humiliated herself enough for one day. The cool air outside felt like a relief after the suffocating tension of the coffee shop. Zara walked quickly toward her car, trying to process what had just happened and wondering if she'd ever be able to show her face at Grind Coffee again. Zara spent the next week throwing herself into her work with unusual intensity. The tech startup project was going well. She found herself second-guessing every creative decision, wondering if her ideas were actually good or if she was just fooling herself like she had with Vincent. She'd been avoiding Grind Coffee, opting instead for a chain place across town that served mediocre coffee, but didn't hold any memories of literary discussions or hurt expressions. Every time she passed the familiar green awning, she felt a stab of regret and embarrassment. It was Friday afternoon when her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. This is Holly Martinez. Would you be free for coffee tomorrow? I'd like to talk to you about something. Zara stared at the message, trying to figure out what Holly could possibly want to discuss. Maybe she was planning to report her to someone, though Zara couldn't imagine what crime she'd actually committed. Beyond social awkwardness, against her better judgment, she texted back, Sure. Where? Grind Coffee, 2 p.m. Vincent will be there too. Zara's stomach dropped. This was either going to be a very uncomfortable confrontation or some kind of intervention. Either way, she deserved whatever was coming. She spent Saturday morning cleaning her apartment obsessively, as if organizing her bookshelf could somehow organize the mess she'd made of her life. By the time she walked into Grind Coffee, she'd mentally prepared for everything from a lecture about honesty to a threat of legal action. Vincent and Holly were already seated at a corner table, both looking up when she entered. Vincent's expression was unreadable, but Holly smiled and waved her over. Thank you for coming, Holly said as Zara approached. Please, sit down. I want to apologize again, Zara said, remaining standing. I know what I did was wrong, and I'm sorry for wasting your time and creating confusion. Actually, Vincent said, that's what we wanted to talk to you about. Holly helped me understand some things about the situation. Zara looked between them, confused. What kind of things? Sit down, Holly said gently. Please. Reluctantly, Zara took the third chair, clutching her purse like a shield. I've been thinking about what you said, Vincent began. About feeling like your opinions mattered. And I realized that my reaction was more about my own embarrassment than anything you actually did wrong. But I lied to you, Zara said. You went along with a misunderstanding, Holly corrected. There's a difference. And from what I observed, your insights about literature were genuine and thoughtful. Vincent nodded. That's what I've been trying to wrap my head around. Conversations we had, those were real. Your thoughts about psychological realism, about emotional grounding, about the balance between complexity and accessibility, Those were all legitimate literary insights. But I'm not a professional critic, Zara said. So what? Holly leaned forward. I've been reviewing books for 15 years, and I can tell you that some of the most interesting perspectives I've encountered have come from readers who aren't professionally trained. Sometimes being outside the industry gives you a clearer view. Vincent pulled out his tablet. I've been working on that character we discussed, the forensic psychologist, and I keep coming back to your point about grounding. Psychological elements in relatable emotions. It's changed how I'm approaching the entire narrative. Zara felt a flutter of pride, quickly followed by confusion. I don't understand why you're telling me this. Because Holly said, I have a proposition for you. Opened her messenger bag and pulled out a business card. I freelance for several publications, and I'm always looking for fresh voices to contribute guest reviews. Your perspective on contemporary fiction could be exactly what we need. Zara stared at the card. You want me to write actual reviews? Guessed. Reviews to start, Holly clarified. See how it goes? The pay isn't great, but it's real literary criticism. It will give you a platform for those opinions you thought didn't matter. I don't have any credentials, Zara said weakly. Neither did I. When I started, Holly replied. I had a degree in library science and a lot of opinions about books. Credentials are nice, but insight is what matters. Vincent was watching this exchange with obvious interest. What do you think? You interested? Zara looked at the business card, then at the two people who had every right to be angry with her, but were instead offering her an opportunity she'd never imagined possible. I don't know if I'm qualified, she said honestly. Let me ask you this, Holly said. Do you love books? Yes. Do you think about them after you finish reading them? All the time. Do you have opinions about what works and what doesn't? Definitely. Then you're qualified. Holly smiled. Everything else is just technique, and that can be learned. Vincent leaned back in his chair. Plus, I'd still love to get your feedback on my manuscript. If you're interested, that is. As a beta reader, Holly added, it's a legitimate part of the publishing process. Zara felt overwhelmed by the generosity of these two people who had every reason to write her off as a fraud. Instead, they were offering her a chance to turn her deception into something real. Why are you doing this? She asked. Because, Vincent said, good readers are rare. People who can articulate why a book works or doesn't work are even rarer. You have that ability, regardless of your professional background. And because, Holly added, I remember what it felt like to want your voice to matter. If I can help someone else find their platform, why wouldn't I? Zara looked down at the business card in her hands. Holly Martinez, senior literary critic, with contact information for 3 different publications. Kay, she said quietly. I'd like to try. Vincent grinned. Excellent. I'll send you the first few chapters of the manuscript this week. And I'll start you with something manageable, Holly said. It's maybe a debut novel or a book of short stories, something where your fresh perspective would be especially valuable. As they talked about deadlines and word counts and the proper format, for submissions, Zara felt a strange sense of everything clicking into place. A week ago, she'd been a struggling graphic designer whose biggest literary accomplishment was finishing a novel in one sitting. Now she was discussing her first professional review assignment with 2 people who seemed genuinely excited about her potential. Have to ask, she said during a lull in the conversation. Are you sure about this? I mean, don't you think it's weird that this all started with me pretending to be someone else? Vincent and Holly exchanged a look. Honestly, Holly said, I think it's the best kind of weird. You've stumbled into a conversation about something you're passionate about, and instead of dismissing you when the truth came out, we realized you had something valuable to offer. Besides, Vincent added, some of the best stories start with mistaken identities. Maybe this is just the beginning of yours. As they prepared to leave, Vincent handed Zara his business card. My email is on there. Feel free to reach out if you have questions about the manuscript or just want to discuss books in general. Thank you, Zara said, meaning it more than she'd ever meant anything. Both of you. Promise I won't let you down. You won't, Holly said confidently. And even if your first review isn't perfect, that's okay. Every critic starts somewhere. Walking out of Grind Coffee, Zara felt lighter than she had in weeks. She had a new project to work on, a potential new career path to explore, and the validation that her thoughts and opinions had value beyond her imagination. Her phone buzzed with a text from Vincent. "Looking forward to your thoughts on the manuscript? Fair warning, it's about someone who isn't who they appear to be."
Zara
Smiled as she typed back, "I think I can relate to that." As she drove home, she was already mentally composing her first review, thinking about how to balance analysis with accessibility, how to ground complex ideas in relatable emotions. For the first time in years, she felt like she was exactly where she was supposed to be. The mistaken identity that had started as an embarrassing deception had somehow transformed into the beginning of something real. And that, Zara thought, was the kind of plot twist that even Vincent Cross would appreciate.